Hey guys, what's up? This is Double Zug. This is going to be a Stonevault healing guide. Actually, I don't think I show my build here, so I'm going to show that first. This is the build I'm running for Stonevault. You can see I just grabbed Curse to spell and then some typical class tree stuff. I'm running Totemic here. I think that my guide I talked about Farseer a lot. I think Totemic is actually really strong for like hierarchies. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, just the damage you get from Acid Rain passively with your Searching Totem for like one global is really, really insane, especially on like bigger pulls, and on these higher keys you kind of want that extra damage. And I think like your mana issues, as long as you are playing correctly, you shouldn't really have too many mana issues with Totemic. It's a lot harder to manage your mana than it is on Farseer. And also I think that Farseer's strength really is like healing up single target healing checks, as well as doing like some single target damage with your ghosts. You can do all those things with Totemic, and you also just get this benefit of having Acid Rain as well as Downpour. Downpour is just insane value on these really high keys where people, especially in pugs, where people aren't going to always use their defensives. And the optionality to have like twice as long to use your Downpour with Surging Totem is really, really nice, as well as just like the radius and stuff you get from this, and like Totemic Projection. So this is a build. I get Deeply Rooted Elements, I get some Chain Heal talents here. I miss out on Spouting Spirits and Current Control, but I don't find I have too much issue with CD coverage. Downpour is like super important here, again, just as a really nice defensive there with that 10% HP stacking with Ancestral Vigor. I think this is one of the biggest reasons why Resto Shaman is so meta in M+ right now, is just these two talents. And honestly, if you're going to nerf Resto Shaman because of its overrepresentation in M+, I would probably just remove the 10% HP from Downpour, and just that would probably be enough. So you can see here in this Stonevault, we're going to be, lower the volume there a little bit. We're going to be lusting on this first pull, pulling really big this whole hallway. You can just sort of chain stops here. You can see we also have a Unholy DK and a Ret who are doing really, really high damage on this pull. You know, Unholy DKs can really burst really high. It's better at that specific thing, bursting with CDs and Lust, than Frost. And, you know, both DK specs are actually pretty good. You can see here we actually have Luxthos, the Weakor guy. I just randomly queued into him in a pug. And so yeah, you know, shout out to him. His Weakors are pretty cool. Does a lot of work on that stuff. Yeah, so he actually was blasting too, playing well. So you can see these pulls here are actually quite dangerous on high keys because of the AoE that these big golems do. On like a 12 or something, you might actually need to like sort of chain defensives here, but you can see just Downpour and the 10% HP from my chain heals is doing a lot of work to mitigate any kind of one-shots, and I'm just topping people between here. You can see we did have the Ret die, but it's not too big of a deal. One death is just fine. You can see we're sort of chaining these golems together. Quite dangerous, but Resto Shaman Totemic you shouldn't have any problems doing enough HPS to have people topped between these AoEs. You can also see I have the cooldown of their abilities on my Plater profile. This is really, really useful just to have like some way of tracking that cooldown, so you know when you need to be potentially like pre-casting chain heals or some kind of healing here. You can also see I'm using Healing Stream Totem. I prefer in most dungeons to use HST over Cloudburst, specifically for Totemic. For Farseer, Cloudburst is really nice because on Farseer you don't have as much on-demand AoE burst healing. But for Totemic, it's really nice to have HST because you can pool 2 charges, and then when you need burst healing, you just drop both of them. You get 2 free chain heals. You get really big healing out of the totems because of how the talent works with like how they're increased 100% at first. You can also see this boss here. Really nice because if you skip the RP, you don't get the time to drink. So you see I did call out I needed a drink there. So the way I play this boss is I just break every spike every time. On a higher key, you can see a wall there. You kind of just want to rotate your defensives here. There I got a Deeply Rooted proc, so I should be fine healing through this without a cooldown. It's also really, really useful. This is a full, just random pug group. Try to get people to play in your healing rain, especially in Totemic, because your healing rain is going to be doing a lot of healing, and also that Downpour is just insane defensive value. You can see our mage is playing out of it, but everybody else is trying to stay in it pretty well. And the mages, you know, mages are pretty tanky, so you should be fine here.
Spell reflection.
So yeah, for this boss, you can see I have like just a basic dungeon weak aura. I forget which weak aura this is, but it tracks the tank debuff, and it just sort of counts down to when you ought to dispel. Usually this thing is correct, but yeah, you kind of just want to wait to dispel this debuff until the boss casts like an AoE, and then you just get that 50% DR. Although on an 11, it's not too hard to just heal through it, so it's not super important that you dispel this at the right time, but if you went up into like 12, 13, you probably would need to really time that correctly. So yeah, I'd recommend just getting the Dungeon Weak Aura pack. This is just like the top one on Wago that I just randomly clicked and copied, so this boss is really not that difficult. Even on an 11, the damage from the spikes AoE, specifically for Resto Shaman, is really not that hard to just heal through. You can see here I'm rotating my I'm shield walling whenever it's up, and I'm rotating defensive. So I'll use like Tide for one, then Link for one, then AG, and then Ascendance. This is just, even though you don't really need to do this for like a 10 or 11, it's just really useful to get into the habit of rotating your defensives and your throughput cooldowns, even if it's not strictly necessary, just to get into practice of doing it. In my opinion, usually the problem with healers is not setting their cooldowns enough rather than setting them too much. So if you're like trying to be better at the game, you should always just err on the side of using your CDs. Just try not to use all your CDs at once. You want to have coverage in M+, and spreading them out is really, really useful. So you can see there we just blast through the boss, and we're just instantly going to chain into this pack. My mana is a little bit low here, but a lot of these packs, if you get your stops and your kicks correctly, you can see there I'm kicking the Invader, Arcing Void. We also have 2 Curse Dispels here, so we'll be just fine on these curses. I can pretty much just drop Surging Totem and then basically just spam damage and regen mana pretty quickly, so really not too huge of a deal if your mana's low on these packs. You can also sneak in a drink and sit a couple of ticks, although with a Prot Warrior that can be a little bit more dangerous because they don't have as much self-healing. But if they're going into a pack with some Rage and some Ignore Pain and like a shield block up, you can sit safely some ticks of drink between these packs. It can be very, very useful, especially as it's Shaman, because we have some mana issues, to just really try to sneak in drinks whenever you possibly can. Even if you get 2 or 3 ticks of drink, it's really, really useful and it can really increase your speed. These packs here are not too dangerous. Just remember to prio kicks on the Mender when they heal. If you're in a pug and people aren't kicking, in this group people are kicking and using their stops really well. It's just a really good pug that I just randomly procced. But especially as a Shaman, you have a lot of low CD kicks and you have a lot of stops, so just try to focus on the Menders and try focusing on kicking particularly the heal they cast. All the other spells like the bolts and stuff like that are not super dangerous, especially below like a 12. The bolts really don't hit that hard, and you won't have too much problems just healing through the damage there. But yeah, you really want to focus on kicking this. They should be casting in here. It should be up pretty soon. Yeah, you can see they're restoring metals. That's your prio kick. So yeah, if you're a healer with a kick, ideally you're a healer with a kick and you're not a priest or something, but just focus on primarily stopping that mending ability, and the rest of the stuff you can sort of let through and sort of allow your pug group to just, kick or not on the bolts. But if the only person whose play you can be assured of in a pug is your own, and so you should always prioritize kicking and stopping the highest priority ability if you don't know that your group is going to be doing effective stops and kicks. This pull here is quite dangerous. I didn't know exactly where the tank was gonna pull. You can see there I just gust of wind over that. You can get kind of caught on this railing here if you aren't careful, which you can kind of troll. But this double loader pull in the middle, I think it's pretty safe in pugs to just avoid this. You can really wipe groups just by having people mess up the frontals with the double loader pull. And honestly, these big pulls in this room are really not that dangerous. There's a lot of mobs in them, but as long as your tank is on top of things, they shouldn't be too difficult just to heal through. You can also see, I think we're going to grab the, there's like a verse buff you can get back here with, I believe, like blacksmiths and dwarfs. So ideally, you'll have a bunch of dwarfs because dwarf is like this, right? But you can see I'm a Tauren because I'm a noob furry. But yeah, ideally you'll have a dwarf and you can get that burst buff, which is pretty significant, right? It's a lot of DR and some decent damage. I believe it lasts like 10 minutes, similar to the mists buff. And again, you can just see here these double menders. Just try to get kicks on that restoring metal. You can see we're getting a lot of stops and knockups here, so it's another thing to mention is that if you're playing Shaman or any class with a kick and a stop, like a knock or something like that, or like H-Pal if you have like your blind or whatever, if your kick isn't going to be up for like a mending, you can always just save your knock, and if you knock the mending and then wait for it to cast again, you can usually like delay until your kick is going to be up again. So if you can't kick, it's always good to just stop, especially in pugs where, again, you don't know that your groups are going to kick or not. This pack's pretty safe. You could probably double into this pack if you want to, maybe grab this. But our tank seems to know his route, and I don't know the route, so, you know, c'est la vie. This boss, you can see here I'm gusting it forward so that I can sit a drink while the other players are running up. This is quite useful. I'm asking if we're going to lust here just because, I don't know. You never know when people want to lust. We have like 15 seconds left on the CD. This boss is very dangerous if you just haven't practiced the mechanics a couple of times, but once you get it down, especially with the changes they've made, this boss is really not too hard. You can't really get like the super dangerous overlaps anymore. You can see here that after he does the scrap song, he's always going to do like a ranged cast. And just because I'm a shaman and I have that short CD range kick, I'm just always going to go grab it. Like the mage could get it as well, but I'm just never going to leave it up to chance, and I'm just always going to get the kicks when I can. You can see there pinging. It's very useful on this part of the fight to just ping the safe spot so that anyone who can't really see it very well or just needs a little bit of help getting there can get there. You can see here I sent a healing tide there. You don't really want to double up CDs on that big burst. It's not too much damage on an 11, especially if you have your downpour up and you're spreading out your HP buff with your like riptides and chain heals and stuff like that. This one, I think I send... Maybe I just heal through it. See, I grabbed that ranged kick there. Yeah, I just healed through it with the healing rain and downpour. You can see I try not to use chain heal unless I have high tide, and as well as like if you have high tide and you have your tidal waves procs, just casting like a raw chain heal with no buffs to it is like pretty mana inefficient, and you're much better off just like sending some totems or sending some riptide healing wave. You can see there I link this one, and we don't really drop too low here. I should probably ascend the next one, although we're going to kill the boss before it really happens. You can see we just have like a lot of raw throughput, enough to heal through the AoE bursts here.
Anti-magic shell.
And you can see I should grab the kick on this.
Divine shield.
Yeah, I do there. So, again, this boss is super easy if everyone just does the mechanics correctly, and if you don't do the mechanics correctly, this is like a really, really hard wipe point for a lot of pugs, just because people will get hit by the box and die or not get to the vents correctly. But if you do everything correctly, there's really not that much healing or damage to really be done. So I think here we actually skip the, you can see I get caught on the railing there. Here we just skip that pack and we just run back natty. This is probably not the best way to do this, but the tank knew that we didn't need that pack for count, I guess, and just didn't want to do the pull. So it's not too much longer to just run back as opposed to going through the minecart here. See, doing a little bit of banter in the meantime while we're running. These pulls up to the like crystal boss can actually be quite dangerous. The spoilers do this void outburst that every like 20 seconds, and it just does a huge amount of damage. So again, this is a really good time if you're a DPS or a tank to play in the healing rain. But just make sure you have like some HSTs, charges, and maybe like a spread your Riptides out, and have a Deluge up for that AoE. Here you want to kick Prio the Piercing Whale. That's the highest Prio kick here. The rest of the abilities don't do too much, so not too huge of a deal to miss kicks on other things, but on that Piercing Whale, super high Prio. The little Gear ability will silence, but it's not that big of a deal unless it goes on a healer. But you can see I do kick it there.
Embrace who you
These, you could probably double up or triple up this pull here, not too dangerously. Again, there's not like really that much AoE. You don't have like a despoiler in the pack. You have these Ellies that will do this like swirly thing. So as long as people can dodge swirlies and get kicks on the Howlers every like 20 seconds, these packs are really not super dangerous. But again, in a pug, like a lot of these dungeons, the timer is pretty lenient, and you can really do like 1 or 2 pack pulls consistently and still time the dungeon really easily if you don't die. So in a pug, if you're like a tank or whatever and you're pulling, like prioritize not dying over doing these big, huge pulls. Although in this group, people are playing super well, so we could probably have like double or tripled up there. Just sent some cooldowns. You can see all my cooldowns are sitting on off cooldown, and it's just because we haven't taken enough damage to even need really that much healing.
Shield wall.
Although in these situations, it can sometimes be useful to just send like a healing tide if you know you're not going to need it in the next 2 minutes, and then just instead of doing some maintenance healing with like Riptide and some casted heals, just full send damage. You can see here I'm doing like almost 600k DPS, and that's just the strength, like I was talking about before, of Totemic with how much damage Acid Rain does. And that's really the main reason why I would go Totemic in these types of higher keys over Farseer, just because you have the throughput. You don't really have as good of a single target healing check throughput, but your damage is just so much higher, which is really, really powerful, especially when you don't know that your DPS are going to be on the ball. So this pull is quite dangerous. Again, you need to do a lot of healing. You can see I dropped my healing tide for that first AoE pulse. There's dispels going out, as well as the swirlies. You're going to get double swirlies, right? Because there's 2 elementals. So just a really check of like whether or not you can do healing throughput through the AoE and also dodge these swirlies. If you dodge the swirlies, this pack shouldn't be too much of a problem though. Below like a 12. You shouldn't need defensives to live the AoE if you just get to cast a couple heals.
Countered.
This pack over here is way less dangerous because again it doesn't have a despoiler, and it just has like these 2 speakers and an invader, so not too like there's not really any super dangerous casts coming out here. As long as you have a curse dispel, like really shouldn't be too much of a problem. And again, just dodging these swirlies. You could probably double up this pack here into this one. I wouldn't double up on the despoilers because the despoilers are really, you know, if you get an overlap on the AoEs, it can be super dangerous. But this pack could probably be pulled into the entrance pack as well. This boss is actually kind of a cool one. I really like this boss. It's kind of fun to heal. I imagine it's fun for DPS as well. There's like a lot of the healing buff you get is really just makes you feel super powerful. So you can see here you just want to kill all these little shards and make sure that your healer gets one of the first buffs. You can see these little blue orbs. The tank, I think, is just pinging that orb over there. They give you a damage buff on the shield, but they also give you a huge healing buff. So you always want to grab at least one of the first ones, and then you want to have 2 stacks refreshed going into this shield. If you don't have any orbs, it's going to be very, very difficult to heal through this AoE damage. So your number 1 priority on this fight, even if you get missed orbs on your DPS, just have at least 1 stack on your healer going into this. Very, very important. So as a healer, just in a pug, if you don't know if people are going to leave them for you, just really charge, like use your movement speed abilities, use your, your gust of wind, your divine steed or whatever to just rush one of those orbs so that you don't get stolen from your DPS. In this group, people are managing it really well, though. Also, it can be very important not to overlap the explosions on the little shards. You can see when they die, that X is going to die here pretty soon. You'll see there's like a big burst of AoE. Very, very important not to kill like 3 at once and global the group. That's happened to me a couple times in pugs just because the DPS go crazy and cleave everything.
Shield.
This is a fight where it's hard for everyone to play in your healing rain. So you can see here I'm just ascending this AoE.
Spell reflection.
I actually double up CDs there. Probably a mistake, sending Tide and Ascendance in the same go.
Embrace who you truly are.
But the boss is going to die pretty quick. I also saw that the shield was lasting a little bit long there, so it's always safe. I have Link here, and we're probably only going to get one more shield, so it's just fine that I doubled up there, but ideally I'd only send one cooldown. You can see here a little bit of a mistake. I'm dropping my Earth Shield, but not too huge. Again, just grabbing these, making sure you grab one of the orbs is very, very important here as a healer. Doing some AoE avoiding, popping my Spirit Walker's Grace so I can send some chain heals as I run out of that AoE. One thing in my play that I could definitely improve is using Spirit Walker's Grace a little bit more.
Shield wall.
I definitely don't send it enough at all. But we have a lot of tools to use during movement anyways. We have a lot of totems, especially on Totemic, where your totem will automatically send a chain heal. You also have your Riptides, you have your NS, you have like just a lot of buttons you can press as a shaman when you're moving. So not too big of a deal, but again, probably something I could improve is sending more Spirit Walker's Grace. So you can see here we're just about maybe gonna beat this next shield.
Monetide.
Like, we could probably just full focus boss here and not even kill these ads, but c'est la vie. This affix is pretty nice for healers. It gives you some CDR. I don't know exactly what is affected by the CDR, honestly, but the percent healing buff is really nice. And it's super easy to just cleave down. You just drag it into the group. So here we're going into the last hallway before the last boss. This is actually the place where I've lost the most pugs. A lot of the times it feels like the tanks just rush in here and like get globaled, or people get hit by these frontals. This is like super dangerous. I probably would just pull all these guards into the next pack, but again, for safety here, we only have one death. We have 12 minutes left in our timer. There's no reason to get too dangerous with this pull. Try to position yourself near a wall so that the melee don't lose uptime on these ads. But again, just living is more important than melee uptime, so prioritize dodging. These smashers, I think they nerfed the damage on this quite a bit because it just doesn't seem like it's hitting as hard as it used to. So as long as you don't pair one of these smashers with like an Earthburst totem, you should be fine to just heal through this natty. You shouldn't need defensives or like any kind of healing cooldowns below like a 12 maybe for this. So you can see here I'm playing right next to this wall so that if I get the frontal, the mob will just run into the wall. For this pack here, there's 2 guards. You can see I'm just totemic projecting my healing rain. Very useful to always have your healing rain on top of the mobs. Very important to have that totemic projection if you're playing totemic. And you can see here again, just playing on these walls. I feel like the best way to do this is just you play on this wall. If they if they charge at you, you just swap to the other wall and just kind of bounce them back and forth. You can see here these menders do that heal cast. That's really the only important kick in these packs here. These mobs, the like earth whatever, they will summon the totem, but that's not kickable. So you can just send your kicks safely on bolts here. And the Earth Burst totem do not have very much health, so if you have like a Lava Burst cast, you can see there I send a Lava Burst into it. Even you as a healer can kill those totems pretty effectively, they just have such low health. And you can see here I'm just sending my kicks on the bolts. You can stop the Earth Burst totem cast with like a knock-up or a stun, but they'll just recast it right away. But again, if you have like enough coordination in your groups, you can just like kind of chain stop it and prevent it from going off. But it has such low health that it's really not that big of a deal if it gets off. You can see there I send another Lava Burst into it. We get a double spawn there, but no problem at all. If that Earth Burst totem does go off, it basically is a wipe on like an 11 or 12 or higher, unless you have big defensives. So if one is about to go off, you can like Spirit Link, send like an Aura Mastery, whatever raid defensive you have.
3, 2,
send your wall and just kind of hope and pray that your DPS players actually press their buttons.
Anti-magic
Here,
wall.
these stone shapers, again, you can just send your kicks on the bolts and your stops. You can save your stops for the totems if you want, but ideally, it doesn't really matter too much. You can just always send your kicks on CD here.
3, 2, 1.
Spell reflection.
I wouldn't double up
countered.
these packs, but if you do double up these packs, I would try to get the first Smasher to cast its AoE, and then pull the other pack so that you can, like, desync the casts. Because as long as there's, like, 10 seconds between rock smashes, you can probably double up these pulls just fine. It's just if they you can, oh man, look at that. Look at this beautiful play here. Oh lord, look at that. This is insane. You can see there I moved to the edge of it, and I'm just like, oh, I'm probably safe, and then I just die. So, just always play safe. Don't be greedy with swirlies. WoW is like, the visibility in WoW is terrible with swirlies, because, as you can see, like, I'm just going to back up and look at that again. This is just like a kind of a little gripe that I have about WoW visibility, but the weird thing about swirly design is that the edge is not the most well-defined part of the visual. For a swirly, like, the most important thing is where the edge is, and just WoW has decided to make their swirlies have, like, the edge be the least well-defined part, where it's, like, just a very barely visible particle effect. Whereas you can see where the middle is perfectly, right? Because all these swirlies are super well-defined, but the edge is just, like, I don't know. That's just a gripe, though. Personally, I would redesign how the swirlies look in WoW to make them more visible. Just to make, like, where the edge is easier to tell.
3, knock.
So again, just another one of these pulls. We have 8 minutes on the clock, so no reason to get too aggressive with doubling up here. Just remember to kill those totems, walk out of swirlies,
Countered.
and
Countered.
heal up the
Spell reflection.
rock smash.
Affix.
This
Countered.
last boss here is kind of annoying just because there's such a low uptime for melee that it just takes a year, it seems like, to kill every time. It's not really that dangerous of a boss, but again, it just takes so long. Because especially, like, in this group we have 2 melee, and one of them's a ret, right? So you can do a lot of damage from range, but it's just a miserable experience, honestly, this boss. Personally, if I were to redesign this boss, I would just make it cast its, like, AoE ability less and just have it do a lot more damage some other way. Just because it's really annoying to have to run out with your little puddle thing every 5 seconds, it seems.
Spell reflection.
Clear.
The way I like to play this fight is just try to clear myself
Drop.
ASAP and then get a central position so I can heal. The biggest way you're going to get deaths on this fight is by having people run out of range of you.
Affix.
Like, I would hate to heal this fight on a Preservation Evoker, for example. Like, it just seems like DPS always pick the opposite direction to run of you. Also, with these puddles, it's not a huge deal that you drop them super far out. They don't really do that much damage, and it's more important as a healer to have a range on people than it is to drop your puddle, you know, in the center. You can see there the frontal actually has, like, a maximum range, so you can just run outside of it and you won't take damage. You can see here the damage is really not that high, but I do send a Mana Tide there, or a Healing Tide rather, in the middle just to get people topped up. If you drop, like, HSTs or Healing Tides in the middle of the room, they will always range people no matter how far they run away from you, which is quite powerful. So you can see here I just get right next to this as it spawns, and then I run back to the middle so I get range on these people. I'm going to drop a link there just because people are a little bit low. Again, there's really not that much damage out in this fight, as long as people aren't, like, standing in puddles or getting hit by frontals, so you can be a little bit liberal about sending your cooldowns even when it doesn't seem like you really need one, just to make sure people are topped.
Clear.
Not even sure if I even ascend in this fight. Again, you can see I'm positioning really close to these portals so that I can always be one of the first ones to drop my debuff.
Drop.
Although if you do notice that your other players, like, don't have any defenses, you can just always, like, send a wall, send your totem, your, like, absorb totem, and just kind of tank the debuff for a while and spam healing, and then be one of the last ones to use the totem or the portal to clear it. So some heads up play there, but usually as a healer I would just recommend clearing it super quickly so that you have all the time in the world to stand in the middle and just spam healing. You can see that we overlap on our puddles, which is quite bad. Maybe in a 12 we would have just instantly died there, but I believe I had wall running, so not too big of a deal.
Drop.
And this boss is going to drop pretty quick here.
Anti-magic reflection.
Affix. Clear.
Now we can just ignore this debuff probably and just send damage into the boss. But you can see DPS are still running out to clear theirs just on habit there. And I did end up using my Ascendance and AG at the end, so ended the dungeon with all my cooldowns used, which is always good. So that's Stonevault. Again, once you do all the mechanics, this is like one of those dungeons that can be very, very challenging at the beginning. But once everyone does their job and doesn't stand in fire, it's really not that hard of a dungeon, honestly. Especially if you have some curse dispels and you're getting kicks. Like, this dungeon is actually secretly not a very difficult one. It's, you know, it's not as easy as like Dawnbreaker or Arakara, but I think people sort of overestimate how difficult this one is, just because if you go in with pugs who aren't doing like the basic mechanics, maybe haven't learned the dungeon yet, it can seem very, very difficult. So that's Stonevault. Thanks for watching.
Swobu, Zug Zug.